so far we've been able to manipulate a little bit what happens with one object, but one of the nice powerful aspects of using Python is that you can do lots of things very fast in a repetitive way and save yourself some drudgery. So let's work in the file cubes.blend, which should be available for your download, and let's see what Python gives us to work with multiple things, over and over again. So, like, how do we do the same thing to lots of items? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to kind of specify that we have a collection of objects, that we have, a type in Python that would contain not just one item, not just a number or a name, but a whole bunch of them, a list, if you will. So there's actually multiple types of collections in Python, and the first one we're going to look at is a list. So a list is basically an ordered collection of objects. You can define a list as follows. So let's actually make one. So you basically I'm going to assign it to a variable called L, and you basically use these square brackets to define a list. So let's have a look at our list. So I can do a list, and you can put anything you want, any other type inside the list. So I can put in the number 100 as the first item. I can put in the word Sparta as the next item. I can put in even another list as the third item, and I could put in bpy.context as the final item, right? So any kind of object can go inside this list. So now we have, if I hit enter, I have a 4-item list, and the first item is the number 100. The second item is the word Sparta. The third item is another list with 0 and 1 in it. And the final item is bpy.context, right? So if I hit L and enter, or print L, I'll get this representation of what's in this list. This is basically what happens if you try to print out bpy.context on the console. It just tells you what it is. It's the structure context at this location in memory. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But how do you get at specific elements in this list? Well, that is actually not too hard either. It's actually also using the square brackets. So basically what you need to do is type in the name of the variable that refers to the list, or even type out the list itself, and then follow that by square brackets. And inside the square brackets, we're going to put a number that is indexing. It's called an index, and it's telling us which element from the list do we want. Do you want the first one, second one, third one, or fourth one? So if I type in L1, I'd expect to get that number 100 back. But if I hit enter, I actually get the second element in the list and not the first. And that's because Python starts counting from the number 0 instead of the number 1. So if I want the first element, I would type in L0, and then I would get that 100. And I can, get the second, and the third, and the fourth. Now if I type in L4, which is actually the 5th element, I get an error. It says index error out of range, because there aren't 5 items in this list. There are only 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3. There's no 4. So we will get an error. You can also put in negative numbers. So if I put in -1, I'm going to get the last item from the list. So you can count from the end of the list as well as from the beginning. So now that we've done that, let's look at a handy list that we can get out of context. So you notice that here in the 3D view, I have a bunch of cubes. They're just, let's go to wireframe so we can see them more clearly. And we have the light and a camera. And I can just box select all the cubes, and I don't want the light selected, so I'm gonna deselect it here. And so now we have a bunch of cubes selected. And so let's go back to our little context. So remember we have this one cube that's highlighted over here in the corner. So if I do what we did before, bpy.context.object, I get that single active cube, the last one selected. So that's the one that's got the, the light orange, it's white here, and it's the one that is displayed in the properties over here. If I want to get at all the selected ones here, I'm going to do the same bpy.context, but instead of getting the object from the context, I'm going to get the selected, and you can hit Control Space, by the way, to do a completion, and then you can see what's available. So if I just do context dot and Control Space, you get a huge list of available things that you can get out of the context. And so that's how you can figure out what's inside something. It's just by doing this auto completion. And in this case, I'm going to go to selected objects. So I'm just going to do that. And if I hit enter, I get this massive list. And you can see it starts with the square brackets, and it has each cube object separated by commas. So I have a really, really long list. Let's say I want to know how long that list is, right? Well, there's a special function for that. It's called len. So I can just use the old function calling method, right? So you type in the name of the function and then a paren and then the argument inside. And if I hit enter, I have 100 cubes in my list. So if I go back here, I should be able to index in. So to get the 10th cube, I can go like that, and I can get the 10th cube in the list. Now, they're not in the order of their number. It's just a random order of what was selected, so we don't need to pay attention to that matching up, but I can get the 10th element and so forth. I can get the ith element from that list, or the nth element, by indexing into it. So that's great, but what about doing lots of things to it? Now I have this list, I want to do a bunch of stuff, and we're going to use what's called a loop. And so the loop syntax looks like a command, like do this loop, and then everything inside the loop has to get indented in, and that is the sort of the body, the body of the loop is inside the indentation level. And so the indentation level here, and you can indent it with spaces or tabs, it just has to be the same exact indentation, defines what's going on inside the loop. So to do this looping thing, I'm actually going to do it in a, well, first let's do it with our test list here. So I can do for I in L, which means for each element in the list L, enter. And notice I get a handy automatic indentation here. And I'm just going to print I, right? So that we're just going to use the old print function to print out the value of I. And if I hit enter a couple of times, the console knows that I've exited the loop, and it'll print out all the elements in that list. So let's go back to our cubes, and let's actually make our first text script. So we're going to go into the text editor, and we're going to create a new script, and we're going to call this cubes.py. And the first thing we need to know here is that we don't have any of those convenience imports that we had at the top of the Python console. Our script doesn't have BPY or anything like this here. So anything from here down is missing. And if we want to have it, we have to actually import it ourselves. So the first thing we do at the top of any script that uses Blender is import BPY, and that gets us Blender Python. So now we have everything. We have bpy.context, so I could even assign the result to a variable. So I could say my, so list of cubes, or let's just call it like, cubes, right? It doesn't matter what we call it, it's just a label, equals to bpy.context.selected objects. So that's all my cubes. Of course, it doesn't have to be cubes. This could work on any type of object. So I'm just going to call it obs. Once again, the label only affects the readability and not the logic. And then we'll try a loop. So I can do, say, for ob in objects, on obs, sorry. And I'll hit enter. And you notice I get an indentation here. By the way, these 3 buttons are really handy to have on. They do syntax highlighting, line numbers, and so on and so forth. I can then say ob, and let's get the z location. So object.location, and let's say z equals to ob.location.x plus ob.location.y. So we're just going to add the x and y location and put the result in the z location for each cube. And then we can simply go here and click on Run Script. And we've just done something kind of cool, right? So basically each cube's x and y location just got added up and the result got placed in the cube's height. So that's really neat. Let's say we wanted to use one of those fancy math functions. So we can go here and we can do from math import star. We can also get our random numbers, right? So from random import star. And then we can kind of change this line, right? So we can do, instead of taking the sum of these, we can just say that we want a random height for all the cubes. And I'm going to run the script again, and now we got a random number here. And let's say I want it to be a little bit bigger, right? So we can multiply that number by, say, 10 and run it again, and now we have a sort of a bigger distribution of randomness. So you can randomize the locations of these cubes. Now I haven't touched their x and y location. We can do other things. For instance, we can do a assign of ob.location.x and do like sort of a wavy sign function. And we can also like add ob.location.y in here and do another kind of a wavy thing here. We can try different functions here. For instance, here's a tangent. Oops, I didn't mean to hit enter. Run that script, and this is the tan function. We can have a lot of fun with running functions on arrays of objects. One useful thing that we could do is we could rename a bunch of objects, and in the next section we'll have a look at object names and how we use them in Blender.